If you've listened to any recent episodes of the Vincast, no doubt you would have heard me talking about the fantastic iPhone app Vinous, which recognizes any wine with just the snap of a photo. It's a fantastic way for people to log and share the wines that they're enjoying, but it is a fantastic way for businesses to tap into a very quickly growing network of wine lovers in Australia and New Zealand. All you need to do is go to www.getvinous.com/Vincast, and a producer or retailer can download the app, log on, and you can actually start looking at what people are enjoying, comments they're making, what they're rating, and maybe even where they might be buying wines. You can also get access to what wine professionals or very engaging wine lovers might be sharing, and why Vinous users or even people on other social media platforms like Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram might be engaging with those opinion leaders. So I do suggest everyone jumps on board and start communicating with other wine lovers like yourself, and just help Vinous continue to change the way that we enjoy wine. Hello there, Vincasters, and welcome to another episode of the Vincast, the second one for 2015. My name is James Guestbrook, otherwise known as the Intrepid Wino, and here we are, episode number 36. Very excited to be pushing forward in 2015. Like I've said, I've got some really exciting guests coming up on the show, both in Australia and overseas. So I really do suggest you stay tuned, jump onto iTunes or Stitcher and subscribe. And whilst you're there, please do rate and review the podcast. It really does help me by getting the message out to other wine lovers such as yourselves. Now, we are in the midst of summer here in Australia, heading into autumn. Obviously, there's going to be vintage, but there's also lots and lots of fantastic food and wine events going on. And if you are based in Melbourne or Sydney, I do suggest a fantastic resource, which is essentially it's a blog called What's Up Buttercup. And it has all the information about food and wine events going on in those two cities. It's got a really fantastic calendar of events, and it's really great way to make sure that you're not missing out on any of those beautiful food and wine events, such as the Melbourne Food and Wine Festival, which is coming up at the end of February, first week of March. So for my second guest for 2015, I invited a friend of mine who I've known for a few years. I met him in Italy, in fact in Sicily, whilst I was traveling. His name is Jacopo Cossater. He's based in Perugia, originally from Verona, and he is one of the most prominent wine bloggers in Italy, and writes a lot about what he considers to be very authentic sort of lo-fi wines. And he was actually here in Australia for a couple of weeks over New Year's in the first week or so of January, and visited Sydney and Melbourne, and I was lucky enough to show him around to a few places. We visited the wonderful winery out in the Yarra Valley, Bobar, which was fantastic to introduce him to that wine, and we also went to Bray for dinner, which was a really singular experience. So we had a chat about his background, how he came upon loving these particular kinds of wines, how he got involved with the blogging and the writing, and also we talked about his upcoming fantastic publication called Settembre, which is an English, it's written in English, but it's about Italian wine written by Italians. So looking forward to that, hopefully about halfway through the year. So I hope you enjoy the episode. Please do engage on Twitter, Facebook, even Instagram, and get in touch with me if you have any questions, or if you enjoy the podcast. But I hope you enjoy, and I'll see you on the other side. Jacopo, thank you so much for joining me, and welcome to Australia. You've been in Sydney and Melbourne and the surrounds. How have you enjoyed your time so far?
Well, first of all, thank you very much for having me here. It's really an honor. And well, what can I say about Australia? This is a wonderful trip. This is a wonderful country. We've been in Sydney for a week, and it was terrific. And we just arrived in Melbourne.
And I look forward to showing you a few more places before
sure.
have to head back too soon. Not enough time in Australia, I have to say.
Yeah, I know.
It's difficult.
I would like to thank you also for bringing us yesterday in some bars, and starting us to know these new Australian producers.
Yes.
I was very curious about it, because I've heard about it. I read about it, about them, but
well, I think
it's impossible to drink them in Italy. So
you sent me a link to an article written by Giovanni Bietti.
Yes, Giovanni. Yes,
who came for Rootstock Sydney in 2014. And so he wrote about some of the Australian producers who were represented there and how the wine revolution is changing. And so obviously some of the people I've had on the podcast are also very engaged in this. And so you said how, excited you were to try some of these wines. So it was an opportunity, it was a fantastic opportunity to take you to some of the new really cool wine bars in Melbourne, places that I love to go to myself, and show you some of these wines. So, hopefully I can show you a few more before you leave.
Sure. I'm here.
So we met in 2012, when I was on my great tour of the world, and in of all places we met in Sicily, in Vittoria.
At Enoiche Pinti, yes.
Yes, and I have cherished the friendship that we have maintained since then, and I've had the opportunity to visit you several times.
I can remember if that was the first time you mentioned the idea of having a podcast. Maybe in Marsala, maybe.
Maybe. I don't know. Oh, you God. Usually I remember that kind of thing. It's possible. I think because even then I'd started listening to podcasts, so I like, and as much as I enjoy writing and reading, I enjoy speaking much more. Who doesn't like the sound of their own voice? And so I previously, if you hadn't already seen it, I interviewed you. I wrote an interview about you on my blog, and you wrote an interview with me for Intravino, which is a very, very popular, very sometimes controversial a communal wine blog in Italy, so I'm glad you're finally here in Australia. So tell me, obviously we've discussed this in the past, but you're not necessarily from a wine background yourself. You're from Verona originally?
Yes, I'm from Verona. So I was born in Veneto, but I moved very quickly when I was 18, actually, to Umbria, where I live now in Perugia, for studying in communication and media. And actually, it was in Umbria where I fell in love with wine,
What did you fall in love with about Umbria first? Was it the wine or was it Laura?
No, the wine. I met Laura after. As many other Italians, I started my path with the sommelier course.
Sure.
It's very popular in Italy to to have that kind of course, which is a three levels course, and everything started there. I mean,
can you remember what it was that it kind of interested you about wine? Do you remember, was it a particular wine you tasted or a favorite wine bar?
It's very hard to say. A lot of reasons. Probably one of these is it's because of a restaurant. It's a very young place. I used to frequent to go at that time in 2002 probably. And in that restaurant, I started to try several different wines.
Sure.
From several different regions.
Sure.
And so, wine by wine.
Is the concept of a sommelier very common in Italy?
Yes.
It is very common. So it's common for someone to be there to with responsibility?
In different ways.
Sure.
Because a sommelier is, of course, the sommelier role in the restaurant.
Yes.
But it's very popular to be a sommelier and having another work. So just for passion.
So in Italy, compared to, for example, in Australia, a sommelier, there isn't necessarily an association with working in a restaurant.
Exactly.
So you can study and you can get a qualification for
As
a sommelier
without working.
Yeah, so it's a little bit more about you have expertise in wine.
Exactly.
Okay, and so you took the course and you discovered more and more. What kind of fueled your passion? What interested you about the wine that made you want to learn more?
Oh, this is hard to say. In 2007, I started my own blog, and probably that is my key moment in wine.
And what was the reason to start the blog?
Because it was like a diary for me to track my
track wines you tasted or track your thoughts.
Probably if I was born later, probably I didn't open a blog because there's Vivino now.
Yeah,
I mean, I opened the blog just for writing down notes about my testing notes.
Sure, sure. But did you think about people reading them and being interested in?
Yeah, later, like a year later, and so I put in the blog more and more
content.
Yep.
Okay,
exactly.
So you talked more about the producer or about the vintage, that kind of thing. Okay, that's interesting. And did you find you had interest in particular kinds of wine early on, or
no.
It was a slow evolution?
Very slow, absolutely.
Okay. Sure. Did you have the opportunity to travel? Did you enjoy visiting wineries?
Not at the beginning. I mean, at the beginning I was very, I don't want to say stupid, but probably I was very unexperienced.
Naive?
Yeah, naive. So yeah. I was pretending to just open the bottles and drink the wine and understanding it. Mm-hmm. And of course I was wrong.
Sure. But that kind of understanding only comes from experience.
Yeah, of course.
It takes time.
Of course.
For example, when I met you in Sicily, and then even afterwards when we met in Perugia and you took me to some producers, not far from, in Umbria, in Montefalco and Spoleto, I still was very, very closed-minded without realizing it about wine. I had a very limited experience, and my knowledge of Italian wine, although it's still very good for someone particularly not from Italy, I had no idea about this other world, of these very traditional wines and, what some people would consider to be natural wines. I think people will notice that I've had many people on who, have this very strong connection with natural wines, but I was very naive. I remember writing, like after we visited Baia in Montefalco, yes. I wrote about my experiences, and I quite stupidly said, orange wines are natural wines. And I said, the most famous place is a Jura in France, because that's just what I'd heard. I had no idea, I had no experience. At that point, I'd never even tasted wines from Jura. And I actually had someone who, is probably one of the most, experts on Jura wine, Wink Lorch. She actually commented and she said, like the Jura is the tiny amount is natural, and they don't really do lots of skin contact orange wines. And I said, I'm sorry, that's just what I've heard. And I think back to that, and I cringe with embarrassment, because it's like, what a stupid thing to say.
Okay, let's talk about Umbria, for example. Now I'm working with a guide in Italy, and I'm in particular I'm caring about Umbrian wines. Sure. But I'm so far from understanding, from really understanding the soul of Umbrian wines. I'm trying, of course.
Yes. Tell me, what's sort of so distinctive about Umbrian wines? Obviously, there are many different areas. You go to Orvieto, which is very different to...
Umbria has a particular issue, if you can call it in that way, that nobody knows him very well. Everybody knows Toscana, Everybody knows Chianti, Brunello, Vino Nobile di Montepulciano. A lot of people knows Montepulciano d'Abruzzo. Okay, and Umbria is just something in the middle there. So this is probably this is something difficult for Umbrian producers to communicate, of course, but you can find in Umbria a lot of vitality, a lot of producers experimenting and trying to do something new with traditional varieties like Trebbiano Spoletino, like Cilieggiolo di Narni, which, for example, are two varieties that had a very explosion in the last 3, 4, 6 years.
Yeah.
Okay, and I don't know if this phenomenon is possible in a region more strict, more famous, more.
I don't know, like with more tradition and rules and regulations.
For example, take the Sagrantino.
Yes.
Okay. Sagrantino di Montefalco is a very interesting. How can I say? Case of study.
Yes.
Because everything happened in just 10 years.
Yes.
15 years.
Now, the way I understand it, before that, the wine from this area was a sweet wine.
Yeah. Sagrantino di Montefalco born sweet.
Yes.
Then at the end of the 70s, the first producer tried to make it
A dry wine.
Yeah. And then at the mid 80s, they had the first, recognition by the press.
Sure.
Blah blah. And
particularly in this time, there was a thirst for wines that were very big and very dark and
during
powerful.
The 90s.
And Sagrantino was one of the most tannic varieties.
Exactly. So during the 90s, a lot of people invested in the Montefalco area.
Yes.
Not only from Umbria, but from
of course
the whole Italy.
Yeah.
And this decade. I mean, the next decade will be the most important decade for Sagrantino, which is the decade of the maturity.
Of course. So
many
of the vines are now mature, and many more experienced winemakers.
Yeah. Now I think it's a very vibrant period for Sagrantino because you can find in that area a lot of different expressions, a lot of valuable winemaking.
Yes. Okay. Interesting.
It's very exciting.
When did you start to get a little bit more attention and notice people were reading and maybe commenting on your blog?
As I said, I just one day I just opened Google Analytics, and I figured out that there was people reading it.
Yes,
actually, and that was like whoa, and so this is it.
What do you think people were interested in? Why do you think they enjoyed reading your blog?
I don't know. People was reading it because they were looking for a particular wine through Google.
Sure.
Yeah.
I mean, on my blog, I noticed that sometimes. Yeah. In fact, when I was traveling and writing, I tried to give a kind of a funny name for each entry, depending on where I was.
Yeah, sure.
And for my entry from Marsala, I actually took a quote from a cult Australian film called Chopper.
Really?
It's a very small moment, very innocuous, but Chopper and his girlfriend are in a club, and the owner of the club offers them to get can I get you a drink? And she asks for Marsala and Coke.
Really?
Yeah, because this was kind of a popular drink back in the 70s and 80s. And his response is Marsala and Coke, good choice.
Yeah, I love. Do you know Mad Men, the series?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, there's a moment in the first season or the second, maybe.
Yeah.
And where they ask for Chianti at the restaurant.
Yeah, it's so funny. But I get many visitations to my blog because of people are putting in Marsala and Coke into Google, and they come to my blog. It's so funny, and I say, wow, I don't know what they're expecting. They must be kind of, Marsala is a place? Oh, okay. And when did you start to have the opportunity to, what were you doing whilst you were writing your blog? You were working?
Yeah, I was actually working in Milan in the restaurant industry as a PR.
Sure.
So in that period, I discovered a lot of interesting producers due to a friend of mine, which has had a very strong, consciousness about artisans and territorial wines. Yes,
he would introduce you to interesting wines.
Thanks to him, it was 2007 and 2008. I tasted some of the wines I love today.
Have prices changed since then?
No, not so much.
Really? Oh, awesome. That's such good news. Okay, so you moved from Perugia, to Milano. Did you live anywhere else?
No, never.
So, what brought you back to Perugia?
My work experience just finished, and I didn't know what to do with my life. I didn't want to stay in Milan because I didn't have the energy to start over a new job there. So I said, okay, I can go to Perugia where my wife,
your now wife,
my now wife used to live, and with the intention to spend the summer there. And I stayed there. I knew people. We start a business there. So,
what was the business?
We opened an open space office that used to be like an art gallery and a space event and a co-working place. And I just quit that space a few months ago.
Oh, really? And what led you to leaving this? What's happened?
It was just a finished experience,
Okay.
For no particular reason.
So tell me about how you got the opportunity to contribute to Intravino, and tell me a bit about what Intravino is.
Intravino is a project born in 2009. From the beginning, from the start, it began the most popular blog in Italy, like immediately, because of the way of talking about wines.
Yes.
And of course now things are different because there are many blogs, there are many projects on wines. So Intravino is a voice, but it remains one of the most important voices in Italy. And all started because in 2010 probably they asked me to cover an event. I was going to an event related to Lambrusco, if I can remember well. And they just asked me, do you want to write a post on that event? And everything starts there.
What is the idea behind Intravino, and why was it so immediately popular?
Because, before Intravino, wine was very boring. I mean, not really.
Wine or wine communication?
No, wine communication, of course.
Sure. Okay.
People was just writing about wines, about producer, about points. Okay, which is okay, of course, but we started they started to write about the colors, about new producers, about everything.
Change.
Yeah.
Yeah, I find that very traditional wine media, wine communication doesn't want to change and doesn't want to write about change.
In fact, you mentioned natural wines before. I think the internet, and in particular the blog phenomenon, was very important to communicate natural wines, because everything in Italy happened probably from 2004, which is a key date, because in 2004 there was the first edition of Villa Favorita, which is one of the most important natural fairs in Italy.
Yes.
And in 2004, that was just one, and so 2004 is also the year of the first wine blogs in Italy.
Yes.
So the blogs in the following years started to tell stories about those producers,
So you've managed to, in the years you've been involved with wine, establish some very good, very close connections with some producers. Tell me about some of your favorite, your good friends who are making some beautiful wines.
Wow, it's hard to say. I really like some artisan producers, which some are just guys, some not. To Enoiche Pinti, for example, in Sicily. But Camillo Donati, we talked about Camillo before, and Camillo is not so young, but it's a very close friend. So
Sure.
I just like their way of making wine, and their way of communicating their
Terroir.
Not terroir, but their territory, their varieties, their
Philosophy.
Yep.
Okay. Now when I stayed with you, I saw this very beautiful cellar you have underneath, in the, underneath your apartment. And you have a very beautiful collection. What was there a wine that you tasted and just went, wow, like the heavens opened and you realized that wine could be something truly, spectacular and ethereal and...
I have an example, and when I first visited, it was the first time for me visiting Grafner this year, because I visited lots of producers in the Colli region, in Friuli Venezia Giulia.
Yes.
But once in Grafner, I don't know how to say it. I probably I understood so many things about others producers too. So this is an example.
Yeah. Okay. Now, more recently, you have made this very important decision that you wanted to launch your own wine publication.
Yes.
Tell me about your plans, the idea behind Settembre.
Settembre, and the subtitle is A Wine Journey in Italy. It's very simple, because my feeling is that abroad there's so much space for telling stories about Italian wine, about Italian producers.
Yes.
Things are going better and better, of course, but there's so much space, because the wine communication about Italy has been related for years just at points or awards and that kind of things. And I think it's important to talk, to write, to do things about the stories.
Yes.
So the wine producers, about the terroirs, about the region, about a lot of Italian stuff. Because we don't want to talk about only wine. We want to talk about Italy through wine. So, for example, I don't know, but probably in the first issue, there will be a focus on Venice and its Bacari, which is the Venetian name for the bars.
Yes.
Which serve aperitivos.
Is this where a spritz was invented?
Yes, for example.
Now it's the most popular drink in Italy, I think.
I don't know. Maybe. It's very popular in the north part of Italy.
Yes, absolutely. And the idea with Settembre is to have Italian stories written by Italians, but you want it to be for a more international audience, so it will be translated into English. Yes.
Exactly. Yes.
Okay. And do you feel that it's important because the kind of stories you are looking at are not being told even in Italy, let alone outside of Italy?
You got the point. In Italy, maybe, but I'd like to tell that stories in a lateral way, in my kind of way.
Sure.
So with my eyes
to engage.
Yeah,
and like I think that in general in wine communication, not necessarily in Italy, but everywhere, there is not enough kind of real personality in the writing. People are not giving their opinion enough. They're not talking about their own experiences. A lot of the time, I think that articles about wine or stories about wineries are almost like a press release. They could be written by the winery.
Yeah, sure.
They're talking about things that
not this project. This would be very strong.
Sure.
Yeah. Settembre will have a very strong voice.
That's awesome. And you've engaged some different writers?
Yes. I think the best way to tell a story is to catch the best writer who knows everything about the story. So my idea is to involve in this project some of the best and young, of course, Italian wine writers.
Sure.
People, I mean, like me, people who see at the wine and like me and wants to, people who have fresh eyes.
Sure. That's awesome. When are you looking to put this together and have it ready for the first issue?
The first issue is going to be released before the summer. This is the idea.
For the European summer?
For the European summer, sorry. Yeah, sure.
Northern Hemisphere. Because we actually happen to be recording on a day when I think it's about 40 degrees in Melbourne and very muggy. We are sweating. You can't hear it, but we are sweating a lot at the moment.
We're gonna be naked in minutes, probably. So.
Well, let's not go too far.
No, I was joking. No, September will be biannual.
Okay, so two issues per year.
Yeah, 2 issues per year, and the first issue probably before the summer, and the second before the winter.
And if you're looking for distribution, of course, you'd like it to go everywhere. Certainly, everywhere the English is spoken, to really get this important, these stories and the personalities and the wineries.
It's interesting because we got a lot of attention in Italy too.
Yeah.
So. Initially, I hadn't thought about being about selling maybe copies in Italy, but Italy I think will be a major market for us.
Sure. I think the more people involved in Italian wine who are promoting it, the better. They can talk to all of their if it's a winery, for example, they talk to all their exporters and say, hey, you need to get Settembre. They're writing some really beautiful stories, this kind of thing. It's very engaging and it's telling a nice perspective.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And are you planning on maybe you'll do some launch events, that kind of thing, maybe overseas?
It's very early to say that because that's not my job. I have a partner. No, really. I have a partner in this adventure and he's caring about the commercial things.
Yeah.
I'm more focused on the editorial side.
Sure. Of course.
So we are thinking about a big launching event, but we'll see. It's very early now. Maybe in Vinitaly too, there will be something.
Yes, well, I'm obviously looking forward to seeing you there, and maybe we can head to some of the other fairs as well, Villa Favorita, this kind of thing.
Absolutely.
So, tell me, Jacopo, you have experience with a particular kind of wine in Italy. If you, for any winemakers who are listening or people who'd like to make wine here in Australia, what one piece of advice would you give to them to kind of find their own unique way of expressing?
Okay, I have 2 advices. Probably.
2, okay.
The first
bonus.
The first is to drink as many wine as possible.
Yes.
Because I see the more curious you are, the best your wine is.
Yes.
there's so many producers in Italy, just they don't drink. They're not curious. They don't know what their neighborhood are doing.
Yes.
And this is so bad. You have to know your territory. You have to know wines.
Oh, I've heard of many producers who only drink their own wine.
Yeah, and it's very rare to find a producer like this doing a great wine. It exists, of course.
Yeah,
absolutely. The second probably is to try not to be similar to someone, just try to be yourself. If is that possible
which takes time, We are still young in Australia. We are, as far as winemaking, we're still very young. We're still learning so much every day, but it's exciting. I think, we visited some nice wine bars here in Melbourne yesterday, and I think someone said that I think it was Josh, the editor of Alchemy. We caught up for a drink with Josh, and he said that this is probably the most exciting time to be in Australia to
I've
try
learned
Australian wines.
More about Australian wines in 2 hours yesterday than the whole life. Really? Because I tested some exciting wines and wow.
And experimental as well.
Yeah, but this is the problem that in Italy it's impossible to find that kind of wine. And not only from Australia, but also from North America and South America too. There's a beautiful book called New California Wine, written by John Bonnet, which is a California journalist.
Sure.
I love that book. That book. The thing is, no wine is imported in Italy, in France, in Germany. Yeah. Maybe in London you can find something.
Maybe in Germany. You might, maybe Switzerland, maybe.
And the problem it's all about prices, because fortunately we are very, very fortunate in Italy because we can afford to drink wines under 10 euros. So we have a very daily dimension in wine. Wine is really something you kept on the table at lunch, dinner. You can have always some bottles opened at home. You can it's all about this, maybe, no?
Yeah. Access to wine, of course, is very important. And that's the other thing that is really great time in Australian wine, because there's more exciting wines from overseas are being imported. Some really exciting importers here in Australia who are getting small quantities of some very, very amazing wines, very unique wines.
From Europe?
Yeah, okay. Absolutely. So that, I think this is a big contribution to why winemakers are, some winemakers are really experimenting and trying different things, because they're introduced to these unique wines from Europe. So, yeah. Look, thank you so much for joining me, Jacopo. I really appreciate your time.
Wow.
I thank you for coming all the way here to Australia and to sit down on the podcast.
I can't wait to be here again.
Yes, I look forward to it. And of course, I look forward to seeing you in a few months in Italy. Tell me, how can my listeners follow you? And to then find out what's going to happen with Settembre. Like, tell me, you're on social media.
Yeah, it's very simple because my name is Jacopo Cossater, and you can find me on Twitter, on Facebook, on Instagram. And
always the same.
Yeah, and from those accounts you can reach my blogs and all the news about Settembre.
Yeah. Okay. Awesome. Well. Safe journey home.
Thank you.
I look forward to having a lovely dinner tomorrow night at Bray, which is going to be wonderful.
I can't wait, of course.
But probably more important, maybe we'll see some koalas.
Thank you, James.
And as always, thank you guys for listening to another episode of the Vincast. I do hope you enjoyed my discussion with Jacopo. As you can probably tell, he's a really lovely guy. And if you did enjoy it, please let him know, and make sure to follow him on the social media to make sure you don't miss out on any of the developments with Settembre. As always, you can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at IntrepidWino, and you can also follow the podcast on Twitter, which was at the Vincast. You can visit me on Facebook, facebook.com/IntrepidWino, and of course come and visit me on my website intrepidwino.com, which has all the previous episodes of the Vincast as well as lots of other interesting things. And I do suggest obviously subscribing to the podcast on iTunes or Stitcher, and if you do that, you'll obviously get the latest episode as it goes up. And if you could please like, favorite, retweet, rate, review, anything you can do to help me grow the podcast will be greatly appreciated. But until next time, bye.